Hello and welcome to Video Game Hangover. I'm Randy Dickinson and I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
Hello, I'm DJ Ross. I'm in Mountain View, California.
Each week on Video Game Hangover, we talk about the games that have been keeping us up at night. On this week's show, and what will probably be a surprise to no one, we're playing The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom.
And what else?
And that's it. I think that's it. Did you actually play other games?
Well, I had to go to my raid night, but that was it.
Oh. I played some more, what was the other Zelda game I was playing? Majora's Mask.
Majora's Mask? Oh, how's that going? Oh, Majora's Mask show.
I got a little further than I was last week, but then something happened Thursday night at around midnight, and I completely dropped my 3DS at that point and did not play any more Majora's Mask.
Oh, tragic.
So,
this whole thing is such an inconvenience because all I really want to do is play Persona 3. I was in such a groove with that game, and now it's like,
really?
I have to play Zelda. Yeah, I just want to play Persona.
Yeah, I find that Majora's Mask did not scratch my modern Zelda itch. There was nothing about playing Majora's Mask that was like, this is just as satisfying as the sequel to Breath of the Wild.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, it's not really, it's not quite a traditional Zelda.
No, this is true. I mean, neither of them are, honestly, but
True.
What even is a traditional Zelda at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like they were fairly similar for a good run there. Majora's Mask maybe being the exception, but there was like from Ocarina to like Skyward Sword, fairly similar mechanically.
Yes.
That's a whole discussion, though.
But yeah, no, other than that, since Tears of the Kingdom dropped on Friday night, I've really not played anything else.
Well, I'm shocked. Can't believe it.
I'm impressed that you took time out to play Final Fantasy.
Well, I mean, are you?
No,
but also,
I don't know if impressed is the right word.
7 other people are counting on me to show up, so I felt like I probably should.
Are they not also playing Tears of the Kingdom? I feel like this is a universal game.
Oh, no,
experience.
everybody's playing it, but, you know, we've all committed to doing this thing. So, you know, some of us are adults with responsibilities, Randy. We have stuff that we need to do, obligations towards others.
Life is a juggling act, and sometimes you have to juggle Zelda with Final Fantasy.
Yes. You can't just flake on raid night. People get real upset. What
was the screenshot you shared in the Discord of a Final Fantasy press event, and you can see clearly one of the hosts playing his Switch behind his laptop?
So, yeah, occasionally whenever there's a new patch coming out, or there's a new big update, the producer, Naoki Yoshida of Final Fantasy XIV, will do these live streams where he talks about what's coming out in the patch. And it's a lot of fun. It's like it's a fun community event. And this one, the most recent one, was Thursday morning. Like whenever that is Japan time, but basically pretty much on the dot when Tears of the Kingdom unlocked if you had the digital version. So the stream started and he was just like clearly just playing a Switch at the beginning of it. We're like, okay, see how this is gonna go.
Let's wrap this up real quick tonight, guys.
Yeah. But it was impressive. He had the little Tears of the Kingdom Switch. Managed to get his hands on one of those. It's nice to see, people, like, especially developers from other teams, like, openly enjoying the games that, somebody else is putting out. He's not just restricted to playing a Square Enix stuff all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that was one of the many fun things about sort of the collective shared Tears of the Kingdom experience this past week is to see both Microsoft and Sony tweet, hey, congrats. on the release of of Tears of the Kingdom. Everybody in gaming's very excited about this day, et cetera, et cetera. So for, at the very least, the social media folks at Xbox and PlayStation to be that excited and to share in the kind of moment is always feels very kind of unifying and rare.
Yeah, they see that a lot on social media now. They'll like supposed rivals in the space will congratulate each other on launching a game.
Yeah,
but I feel like Zelda is kind of a big deal. That doesn't happen all the time, so
True.
It seems like everybody's really getting into it.
Cool. And we're going to get into it on this week's show. We do want to assuage any concerns about anybody who might be listening who has not had an opportunity to tear into the new Legend of Zelda game yet. We're going to try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. As far as sort of like story beats and things like that go, we'll certainly probably talk about some things that kind of happen in the early hours of the game. But DJ and I have not put 100 hours into this thing at this point, so we will not be ruining the ending for you or anything like that. We'll try to be obviously respectful of people who might be at different places in their experience.
Somebody got through it all already. They did it in like an hour and a half.
There was like a speed run already, like day one.
Yeah, so that's all you need. Take it back to the store.
And I'm like 10 hours in and still like, in the clothes I was born in, and like have not upgraded anything. Can't figure out which, button to switch my sword with. And it just feels like people are having a very different experience than I
am. Some people were just born to go straight to the end, wherever that may be. Well, anyway, before we get too much further into it, though, we have some new music on the show this week.
Nice. Zelda music?
No, should there be Zelda music? It wasn't Zelda music.
Yeah, okay. We would probably get shut down. We get a takedown.
Yeah, it was like, I thought about it. I was like, oh, should we put Zelda music on the show? But Nintendo has just been on the warpath lately.
Just very litigious lately, yes.
Yeah, so just gonna stay out of their way. So in lieu of that, we have music from Fearofdark, who is a chiptune producer from the UK. Has a real cool kind of like, I don't know how to describe this, but it's got that real like indie chiptune sound to me. If you take a listen to it, you'll probably understand what I'm talking about. But some real good stuff. We have selections from his album Exit Plan over the intro and outro. And you can also head over to his Bandcamp and check out an album from a game that he did the soundtrack for, Dr. Kobushi's Labyrinthine Laboratory.
Ooh.
Got that correct. But yeah, lots of really good kind of chippy stuff in there. If you're interested in hearing more, you can go to fearofdark.bandcamp.com. Check all those albums out.
Nice.
So thanks a lot, Fearofdark. We appreciate it. Thanks for not suing us.
Yes, that's very important. That's one of the critical details here. We are very proud to feature your music, and also very proud to not be sued by you.
Yeah. As much as I would want that first criterion to be, we like the music. Number one really is, will not embroil us in a lawsuit.
Yeah. But I mean, how exciting would it be, DJ, to get like a letter mailed to one of our homes, or both of our homes perhaps, from Nintendo's legal defense
Nintendo
team?
You don't think they would just like disappear you overnight? I'd like show up to record and be like, wow, Randy's running real late this week.
People on the internet be all, what happened to that podcast? Those guys kind of just disappeared, just stopped doing their thing.
Yeah. Oh man, both of us. Yeah, I guess
they were so consistent for like 11 years.
Oh man, and then we're just in the Nintendo dungeon somewhere in Washington.
Lorded over by Bowser.
Yeah. Ooh.
Yeah. But no, that would be a cool gaming memento. I would probably frame that letter and hang it on a wall.
Cease and desist letter. Yeah.
Yeah. I would invite friends over to come look at my letter.
Till they repossess the wall it's hanging on.
Right, exactly. I'm sure there's some clause in there about this letter may not be displayed at any time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's going to get another lawsuit for displaying your letter in your home.
It's one of the little Mission Impossible, like, your mission, you choose to accept it, and it just turns into like smoke and bursts into flames a second later.
Yeah. Oh, man. Well, hope we never find out what that's actually like.
Yes. Yeah. Cool. So, any other show business? Anything else before we sort of rip the Band-Aid off and just dig into this thing?
That's it.
That's it.
It's all the business. So, weapon degradation, huh? Everybody loves it. Didn't change it at all. Still
a fan
great.
favorite. Yep. And in fact, the weapons are even more degraded now.
I was going to say, they feel more fragile now. That's the opposite of what we wanted them to do.
Yeah. There is we won't give it away here, but there is an in-game explanation for that. I'm not sure if you've found that yet, but
yeah, it was stupid. Yeah. I was like, seriously?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not going to spend the whole episode complaining about this, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's this sort of like weird dual thing in that like everything is much more fragile now. And there is a cool system that helps you sort of like curtail the fragility of it. But that feels like this needlessly extra, sometimes occasionally frustratingly difficult step.
It's like an extra mandatory step whenever you pick up a weapon.
Right.
It's questionable. Questionable decision, Nintendo. Yeah.
You can't just sort of, well, you can find a sword or a pike or you know, some other thing. What's the one thing I keep finding? And I'm like, who uses these? Boomerangs. And they're all a mess. And you can use them for a couple of crappy, underpowered whacks on some enemy. And then they just shatter. Or you can fuse them with something else in the environment, and you maybe get 10 more whacks with them until they shatter again. Mm-hmm. So you really have no choice but to fuse every weapon you find.
At least that's been my experience.
So before every encounter, I go through my... If I up on a hill, I see a skull-shaped mountain that I know is going to have some bokoblin hanging out inside. I go through my inventory and go, what can I fuse with all of this crap? What do I have on me? What do I have around me? I need a rock. Who's got a rock? Let me fuse it with this sword before I even wander into this thing, because otherwise I'm going to get my ass handed to me.
It's just turned this like already unpleasant thing into a whole process, because when I find a new weapon that I want, I had to go into my inventory and find, you know, some weapon that I'm already carrying, inevitably, because my inventory is full. And I have to remove the fused thing from it and fuse the new thing onto it. And then I can just go back to doing whatever I wanted to be doing in the first place. but it's just like, I thought, I didn't watch the whole trailer where they explain weapon fusion, but I was hoping it would be a little less cumbersome than the current system. It's interesting. It's an interesting system, and I've made some just weird-looking weapons out of it. But it's not exactly streamlining the whole Tears of the Kingdom experience.
Yes, yeah. And I think especially early on, when you don't have access to a lot of resources, and all you have access to is a couple of crappy swords and rocks and leaves and things in the environment, you end up with, and maybe that's the right time for it, some really underpowered weapons. But at some point I started experimenting and trying to figure out like, what else can I stick to this crappy sword to make it slightly less crappy, because the rocks aren't doing it anymore. And there's some fun things to sort of be sussed out there. Obviously you can add elemental effects, which makes everything, you know, a fire sword or a lightning sword if you have the right elemental things to fuse it with. And that is cool, because finding those weapons in Breath of the Wild was always very satisfying. Mm-hmm. Save those for a special occasion. But yeah, it's still a lot. It's still like this whole extra step. And it does make combat in the game feel, we're starting off very negative on Tears of the Kingdom. But
sorry, I realized I jumped right into weapon degradation, but that's just because I wanted to get all the complaining out of the way. Or also because I just am very upset about it.
Yeah.
But I assume everybody understands what, or at least has some idea of what we're talking about. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, new Zelda game, all that good stuff.
I had kind of hoped the whole fusion thing would make it, a lot easier, would make the weapons last a bit longer. And it does do that thing, but you do have to do a lot more like inventory management than ever needed in Breath of the Wild. It feels like the game that I always sort of feel like is me staring at menus for hours and hours in between.
There's a lot of menus in this game.
There is a ton of menus in this game, but it feels a lot like Borderlands in that way, and that it's sort of like, is this a better knife or is this a better knife? If I cross it with the fire element, do I get a fire knife? And is that better than the lightning bolt gun that I have? And yeah, it's a lot of really just sort of like balancing stats and trying to figure out which one gives me an extra 2
Plus
on my
1
attack.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then throwing everything else away and hoping it, doesn't shatter into glass.
Yeah.
On the first strike.
I have to say, I love throwing a weapon at an enemy and having it shatter and you get a critical hit off of that. That is still awesome. But if I could trade that for just having weapons not break in the first place, I'd do that, like, without even thinking about it. I think I'm just getting used to the whole system, like getting, like, reacclimating to sort of the Breath of the Wild approach to weapon degradation. So maybe it'll be better. And also, I just unlocked the method to, like, expand your weapon inventory, which was quite small at the start, considering how many weapons you have to pick up.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe it'll get better, but I think it's still a big miss in terms of improvements to this whole system that I was hoping for.
Yeah.
I made some cool weapons though. Did you find the skeleton arms?
Oh yes, the monster parts. Shitty, rusty, falling apart weapon plus any monster part is usually a good combo. And I have definitely found some really bizarre looking combinations that have just crazy attack damage, and that has been very satisfying. Yeah.
The strongest thing I've made so far is it was like a skeleton arm with just another skeleton arm on it.
Yes.
And I was like, why is this so good? It's like twice as powerful as anything else I have. I guess because they're, you can't really get skeleton arms on demand, so they're a little rare.
Right.
But I'm just like, this makes no sense. On the one hand, I've got this enormous sword with like a boulder on the end, and then like a couple of bones held together with the magic goo or whatever, however it works in this. But it's fine. I'll take it. I got a whole backpack full of them now.
I had an encounter with a huge enemy. They're similar to Breath of the Wild. There are occasionally, big kind of, I hesitate to even call them mini bosses. They're bosses. Not Ganon level bosses, but they're around and they're big and they take a lot more work and a lot more resources to take down. But the rewards are generally pretty satisfying. And I remember late in the Breath of the Wild experience feeling pretty confident about those. I could take on a Lionel or a Cyclops or what are the big stone things, the big taluses. Pretty confidently, knew exactly what the right thing was to do and what weapons I needed and how to combine them and how to use all my little powers and stuff. And I don't feel that level of confidence in Tears of the Kingdom at this point. So there's definitely a lot of unknowns as you wade into a system like that. But my first big encounter with a crazy monster in Tears of the Kingdom, I had a shield with a flamethrower attached to the front of it.
Yeah.
So anytime I would block with the shield, it would also light whoever's in front of me on fire for big damage. And I had a monster arm attached to a monster arm. I beat the snot out of him, but I was terrified that at some point one of those things was going to stop working and I was going to have to switch shields or switch monster arms on the fly and inevitably would get my ass handed to me in that moment.
Yeah. I think I saw one of those things and I didn't know what to expect until it hit me for a lot of damage. So I decided I'll come back and worry about that later.
Yeah. Yep.
That's kind of been a common theme getting into Tears of the Kingdom, though. It just feels like a reset on everything. It feels like starting a new Monster Hunter because you start up back at like square one. And as like my most recent memories of Breath of the Wild, I've got my whole arsenal full of fancy weapons. I got my cool armor, got all those hearts. And I just have like tons and tons of resources. And in this, it just does the whole like Metroid reset where you start out with like 3 or 4 hearts and your stupid broken sword. And you're very vulnerable. And so I don't know how much you've played at this point. I don't know how much I played for that matter. But it feels like a lot of it has just been trying to like reestablish the status quo. Like, man, I want some more hearts. I want the stamina upgrade because definitely don't have enough of that. I want to have just a stockpile of food and ingredients so I can, make potions or whatever on demand.
Yeah.
And just kind of like relearning how the world works because, they said it's the same map, but, it's been a long time since I played Breath of the Wild. And even then, I don't even know how like intimately familiar I was with the map at the time. So it very easily could just be a new map with sort of similar landmarks on it, and I would never know the difference.
Yeah. Yes, it's been. I think that was kind of one of the most interesting sort of pre-release complaints was sort of like, oh, it's the same map. They're just using the same map of Hyrule, and then a couple hours in, you finally get access to that repurposed map of Hyrule, and you're like, I've never been here before in my life. I have no idea what any of this stuff is or who any of these people are. I don't know where anything is, and just completely lost. So yeah, the events of the previous game have definitely taken its toll on the world, and while geographically it is the same place, and there are a few things where I'm sort of like, I've been here before. This seems familiar. It definitely has changed in the time since the previous game.
Yeah. And I appreciate that a lot, that it's able to recapture some of the just like sense of adventuring around, which is good. It's not quite as, it's not surprising in the same way that Breath of the Wild was, because that just did not play like any Zelda game up to that point.
Right.
So I kind of have some expectations of how Tears of the Kingdom works, but a lot of it, I still find myself just, trying to make it over the next hill to see what's on the other side, and maybe there's a village or some other point of interest there. Which is one of probably my favorite element of Breath of the Wild is just the, exploration into the unknown. So that's very exciting that they were able to recapture a little bit of that.
I agree. And it does feel like that a lot of that exploration now is tied to some puzzle you have to solve. Some, in the first game, it was Breath of the Wild. It was a lot of like, do I have enough stamina to be able to climb this mountain to the temple on top of it? And in this one, it's, the temple is on top of a mountain, but the mountain is across a lake, and the lake is also on fire, and there's a Lionel on the other side. So you have to sort of solve solve for the Lionel, solve for the lake, solve for the mountain, and you have this tool set that is kind of essentially available to you more or less from the jump, that will allow you to construct some way out of it, either with a vehicle or with a ladder or with a bridge or some combination of those things. Videos on the internet of people building mech suits and things like that.
It's like Voltron.
Yeah, exactly. And I do like that, although it does feel like there is a little bit of fatigue even already with some of that stuff, where it just feels like things that I'm like, okay, well, I could do that pretty handily in Breath of the Wild. Now it just feels like there's a couple extra steps I have to deploy to be able to do something that maybe felt, mundane or easily achievable at the very least in Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about the new sort of like, I don't even know what you call it, like engineering system, just like building all these machines. Like, it's very cool. It's definitely very cool that the stuff you can do with it.
Yeah.
Just by like building structures and adding like functioning parts to it, like wheels and engines and things. But it's also kind of exhausting. Because, like, first of all, I'm not a mechanical engineer. So I've seen some of these puzzles, and I'm just like, oh, clearly I'm supposed to build some kind of wacky contraption to take advantage of how this room is designed and, here are all the parts that they've laid out for me. I'm just like, I don't know how to do that. Just give me the thing that lets you jump super high and we'll be good. I'll solve the puzzle that way.
Yeah.
And also, there have been some cases, and this is kind of mixed. I'm just like, okay, there's a huge gap here. There's all these pieces here. What are they expecting me to do? I don't know if I'm supposed to build a bridge. I don't know if I'm supposed to build like a vehicle. Maybe I'm not even looking at the right point on the map to kind of cross this gap. Maybe I should be going around. Maybe there's just like a bridge on the other side. I don't know. But I also like that it's led to just me coming up with the absolute most sort of like cursed constructions, I was like, okay, so there was this one part fairly early on where there's like not really train tracks, but like like monorails.
Yes.
You probably know what I'm talking about. And
I do exactly. Yep.
I think the idea is you're supposed to build something using some of the mine carts that are scattered around to like make use of the tracks. And I gave that a shot for a while because initially I really want to sort of like go after what I think is the game's intended solution for these things. And so my first attempt was a disaster. And the second attempt, I just found as many planks as I could. And I made the world's stupidest bridge, which was like just plank after plank. And I think in the middle there were these logs, which was very precarious because he doesn't walk very evenly on logs. Like, he almost fell off a couple times.
Yep.
But then I would just drag this bridge from like the first gap to the next gap. Oh, this was the thing, because there were like several of these gaps in sequence that I think all were expecting a different solution. But no, I just brought this stupid bridge with me across all these islands, and I was like, clearly this is not what they wanted people to do, but it's working for me, and I don't have to think about it anymore, so this is what I'm going to do. This is what's happening.
Yeah, I think it is kind of a funny kind of duality with Breath of the Wild, and that Breath of the Wild in a lot of ways it felt like many of us, particularly especially creative people on the internet, were using some of the tools in kind of unintended ways to bypass some of the more intense or puzzling elements of the game. Essentially more or less kind of, exploiting the physics, exploiting, the way things sort of interact with each other. And in Tears of the Kingdom, like, that's all legal now. It's like built into the code of the game.
It's like the core of the game. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And you're not breaking it anymore. It's sort of this expectation that you be this creative, or at least, have a functioning understanding of how a bridge works by gluing two planks together, even if it's ugly. So I think I've made my peace with the fact that, like, I'm not going to build a giant mech suit like the guy on the internet, right, with, rocket launchers and fire coming out of it or anything like that. I'm going to do two boards with two wheels, and hopefully I can stand upright long enough to get across the thing I'm trying to get across. So I'm definitely doing like function over form.
Yeah.
Although I have made a couple of things that I'm like, that's pretty cool. That looks really neat. I wish I could save that, but then it just, you
it just goes away when you get too far away. I was really excited at first because I didn't really know. I mean, I'd seen little glimpses of Link building vehicles and things in the trailers, which I was trying not to watch. But I wasn't expecting there to be all this sort of like these like building materials. For a while, I thought it might be like Valheim, where you could build whole structures and everything, and I got super excited. And then, it just turns out that everything is very temporary, and or at least up to the point that I played, it doesn't seem like you're going to be able to put together any like long-standing structures. But I do like, having a makeshift bridge constructed out of just weird materials you find lying around. Yeah.
I can tell you that at some point there is some degree of permanence.
Oh.
Not in everything you build, at least not to the point that I'm at, but there is, you said a permanent structure, and that's in there somewhere.
Oh, okay. Well, that's cool. Yep. I found a few cases where there'll be like a puzzle that you have to build something in order to solve the puzzle, and then it just sort of remains solved. But nothing that seems like a permanent structure. So that's interesting. Look forward to that.
Yeah, that's it's satisfying, but it's work. It's in a game that sort of I think in a series that is best when it's like, what's this new thing? What's over here? Let's go over there and see this. This new sort of suite of building tools and Ultra Hand and Fuse and all this stuff in Tears of the Kingdom kind of makes you stop and like work on one thing for a period of time.
Yes.
And I'm not great at doing that in modern Zelda games. I want to go do more stuff. And Tears of the Kingdom kind of makes you sort of like stop doing stuff, just do this one thing. And it's usually some construction project, build a boat to get across whatever. And I'm like,
build this Labo kit.
Yeah, I kind of want to do it faster. I don't know that I necessarily, like, I'm not matching the pace of this game yet. I think I'm still sort of like wanting to consume it quickly and see more things. And it's not quite built for that. It's really, does make you slow down and do some, kind of quasi-elaborate construction before you can proceed. And I find that a little bit frustrating.
So I've had a similar reaction, but I like when faced with a puzzle or a situation where it's clear I'm going to have to build some structure or some elaborate vehicle, I will just like sort of, okay, let's table this. I'll come back and do this puzzle later because I've got stuff to do. I've just been like piling up side quests. And like I said, trying to get back, like, I just want more hearts. I want more stamina. I want to get all the upgrades. So I'm not just, tutorial Link getting one-shotted by everything.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like Breath of the Wild in that it's fairly directionless at the beginning. Like, you'll run into some characters who will say, like, oh, you should go over here. But it's also not really clear what I'm going to be accomplishing by doing that. And also, I just have so many of these different sort of objective markers on the map at this point. It's a little bit, like, not overwhelming, but it just feels like I have a whole to-do list of things to do and so many distractions everywhere that I played this game quite a bit over the weekend, and I feel like I've barely accomplished anything.
Oh, same. Absolutely. I was impressed by the kind of the starting area of the game, in that it is fairly expansive, but it's also pretty linear. There's a very sort of, like, from the jump, you have a pretty clear path and some pretty clear expectations and conditions, and you get sort of enough like flavor of what's kind of coming in the bigger game that it is the sort of appropriate kind of appetizer to the Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom experience. But I liked how sort of focused it was. And it was cool to explore, and it was beautiful, and it felt like, this is all new stuff. And then beyond that, they drop you in Hyrule, literally in the middle of a lake, and you have to sort of like pick a direction to go from there with nothing else to go on. And that was the point at which I've sort of had that kind of choice paralysis, because from there, once you sort of pull yourself up onto dry land, you can see all kinds of like tempting things around you. There's a road sign that points somewhere off in the distance. You can see something kind of glowing in the dark, and meanwhile, somebody's running up the road who looks like they're on a mission, and you can stop them and ask them for help or advice. And yeah, there's all of these sort of temptations, and I'm like, okay, but what's the right one? What direction should I be heading in right now? And that's not this game, man. You have to like be cool with the fact that you're going to have just a buffet of choices, and maybe occasionally, pick the wrong thing.
Yeah, it feels like there are definitely some things that maybe it should have been clearer about guiding you towards, because there are definitely some big sort of like systems in the game that you need to, I mean, it feels like it would be to your benefit if you uncover them sooner rather than later.
I'm running into that because I am now probably about 10-ish hours into the game, and I don't have a tool that I see other people have access to. In our Discord, I've chatted with other people who are playing, and they're like, oh no, you could have gotten that here and at this point. And I'm like, why don't I have it yet? Because I went a different path. I did not pick column A. I picked column B when I first landed in the pond. And that was so many steps ago that I can't even remember how to get back to there. So, yeah, I do kind of wish like that the game maybe was a little bit clearer and funneling me towards that. Obviously, give me choice, give me agency. But I have now come to 2 or 3 shrines where I'm like, well, I can't do the thing that I need to do because I don't have that tool. And
what are you missing?
And this, I'm sorry, what am I missing?
Yeah, what's the thing you're missing?
The glider.
The glider? Well, you know the glider? I have the glider at this point.
I don't have the glider. No, I've put quite a few hours into this thing, and I keep finding situations where I'm like, man, it would be so nice if I had the glider. And,
I'll tell you, I was wondering where the glider was for a very long time.
Yes.
I kind of feel like it should just start you with a lot more stuff than it does, and not rely on you discovering it after you leave sort of the tutorial area.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've fortunately, apparently, I discovered that fairly quickly.
Nope, not me. Yep. I made a different choice. I went a different way, and it took me off the path to the glider. And I got some cool stuff. I did some things, and and met some people and et cetera, but did not get the glider. And now I found a few circumstances where it is required to be able to do the thing. And the expectation of that incident, and I can't do that thing. I have to come back to it later.
Well, I would recommend you figure that out.
Yes, I am.
It's quite important.
Yes, I have people who want to tell me how to do it, and I'm like, no, I should be able to find it on my own, right? So I have found my way back to that starting point, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to pick a different direction.
Okay.
I believe it's here somewhere, and I have it on good faith from a coworker that I'm on the right path.
Yeah, it sounds like you're going in the right direction.
Yeah, so I want to do it. I don't want somebody to tell me where it is. I mean, I could Google it. I'm sure IGN would happily tell me where to find the paraglider, right. But no, I want to solve this mystery on my own.
Yeah, that's actually my favorite sort of like situation in Breath of the Wild and also Tears of the Kingdom, where you are just not being led anywhere and you just don't even know what sort of objectives to expect. Like that was basically how Breath of the Wild played out. And I've been surprised in this one because pretty quickly they basically tell you what you should have been doing in Breath of the Wild. Because they're just like, go check out these 4 corners of the map. I don't know if you've gotten that subquest yet.
I don't believe so, no.
And I was just like, okay, well, I probably would have done that eventually, but they just make it a little more explicit in this one. So yeah, it's like neither a positive nor a negative, I think. Did you encounter this is probably as spoilery as I'm going to get because this was not in any of the previews, I think. But did you go into one of the chasms yet?
No, not really. There's you get a little sample of it in the tutorial area.
Do you
have to? Yeah, I did. We have to sort of generate.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
And then later, once you sort of get to Hyrule, there are little versions of it that you can encounter. But I believe that there is some big underground area that I've not found or been tipped off to yet. So, no, I've not quite done that thing.
Okay, well, we can come back to that.
Yeah.
I've done like the sort of introductory sort of like dive into one of those. But I'm very curious about it because that's by far, I mean, aside from people posting the ridiculous contraptions they're using to murder Koroks, I've seen the most discussion around what is called the depths. So I'm really curious just to see just how far they sort of take that whole thing. Because again, they didn't show any of that, and I think it's really interesting. It seems like it has potentially a very large component of the game.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I get the impression that it is. You do need to be sort of kitted out before you do it, though. I think if you're gonna like wander into something dark and spooky, I think you should be sort of loaded for bear. And I'm not at this point in the game. I am still the same 4 hearts I started with for the most part, and I've got a modest armor upgrade, and still I'm trying to figure out like what are good weapons I should be carrying with me at all times, and I still end up swapping my sword for my bow when I'm trying to hit the jump button sometimes. So even still trying to sort of like reacquaint myself with this little weird unintuitive control scheme they're using here.
It's a little weird. Weird.
So yeah, I'm not ready for that yet. I'm definitely going to have to build up my resilience a little bit before I get to that point.
See, it was weird because the first time I went down there, it seemed fine, but also it's sort of like meant to introduce you to the whole concept. And the way I've heard people talking about it is it sounds like I don't know, like a roguelike almost. And they're saying the same sort of things that you are. They're like, oh, I'm not prepared. You need to really have like your gear in good shape. And I was like, oh, I didn't get that impression of it. Like I can imagine it going that way eventually. But I've only been in there once, so I'm kind of curious to go back in and see if my experience is significantly different. But I'll save that for a future discussion since you have yet to check it out.
I go down every well I can find because that is a cool.
Do you have to go down the wells? Is there like stuff at the bottom of every well?
There's cool. I found some like cool collectibles down there, like ingredients, and there's definitely little critters down there that you can use for potions and things that don't appear elsewhere. And sometimes I feel like the wells, I have found that the wells are connected to each other. So if you go down one and kind of work your way through the creepies underneath, you come out in a well in some advantageous place, usually, not far away from a Bokoblin camp where I could sneak up on them and lay waste to everybody.
Did you find the well enthusiast?
The well? No, I don't think I found the well enthusiast.
Oh no. Okay, sorry. I'm trying not to like give too much away, but you got to find this person because they basically ask you to like catalog all of the wells in the world for them.
Oh.
And I noticed like I discovered a couple wells prior to talking to them, but it only starts recording them on your map after you've had this conversation with them.
Oh.
So you're going to have to find all those wells again.
To go back to them again.
Yeah.
I did notice that the game treats them as sort of significant places, which I thought was surprising, I guess. I'm like, it's just a well, guys. Like anywhere in the world that you sort of like go to that is a new place, the game like makes a chime, and across the bottom it says Hyrule Field. And when you find a well, like behind a place you can park your horse at a stable, it like the well at the stable, and I'm like, are wells more important than I thought? Because it sort of like makes it feel like a notable place. Maybe that's why.
Well, they are very important to this one character, apparently.
Yeah. Interesting.
The map seems to be much better this time around, though. I think it's more to do with that. Like, I noticed it'll mark stuff like caves on the map and other, like, eventual sort of story points of interest.
Yeah.
And I don't really remember that from Breath of the Wild. I remember having to place down all those manual sort of stickers or whatever. And eventually just having tons and tons of those. So it's nice that it does that automatically now.
Yeah. Yes, I remember that as well. Is you had in Breath of the Wild, they had like different types of. There's one that looks like a little castle. There's one that looks like a treasure chest, and you had to like figure out which was the right sticker to put on the map in the right place.
Yeah,
and there does seem to be some kind of auto mapping happening in Tears of the Kingdom, which is welcome.
Yeah, it's actually really good because despite having all those stickers in the first one, it's still just like there's so much stuff on the map. It just wasn't enough, and now they've like slightly improved it. Or actually, that's probably one of the biggest improvements, I think, in Tears of the Kingdom. It's just the map seems much better.
Yeah. It's 3D as well, and I've not necessarily found out where that becomes advantageous, but it does seem as you sort of pan around on the device in-game that has the map on it, you can sort of see, like, dimensionality and the heights of things.
Oh, I think it was like that in Breath of the Wild.
Oh, really? Okay. I don't remember that being notable to me in that game.
I just remember, like, there are those two peaks with like the canyon running through the middle, and they're super tall. And I remember like just panning back and forth over that in the like Link's tablet and being like, "Oh, it's 3D," or hopefully it actually was, and I wasn't just remembering or imagining it that way. But I remember those peaks. I was like, "Oh, okay, that was something that was definitely on the map in the first one." So they're not just pulling a fast one. So some of this is the same map.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, very much so. And, I think it's cool that you're kind of going back to Hyrule, that, if you spent 200 hours like I did on Breath of the Wild, that there will be corners of this that seem familiar, and there will be villages and villagers that you kind of encounter again X number of years later in the course of this game, that you can kind of reacquaint yourself with. There's a seaside village that I remember kind of fondly from Breath of the Wild, and I just got in Tears of the Kingdom some reference to that place, and somebody's like, "Oh, that seaside village is now overrun by pirates," and I'm like, "Oh no, I have to go down there and help those people, but I need better weapons and better armor before I can take on any pirates." But it's kind of satisfying to sort of see the progress and see the evolution, rather than arbitrarily deciding, okay, the next Zelda game is not going to take place in Hyrule. It's going to take place in this other place because we have to build a whole new map from scratch.
Yeah. No, I definitely like that about it. It feels like, I don't know how much time has passed since the first game, but it definitely, like, it feels like coming back to Hyrule after, I don't know, 5 years or some significant period of time has passed and there have been some changes.
Yeah.
Because, like, we weren't present for whatever happened since Breath of the Wild. And some stuff has happened even since just like starting up Tears of the Kingdom. So it's whenever you come to a new place, or whenever you come to a familiar place, I always think like, oh, how's it going to look? Like what's changed since the last time I was here?
Yeah.
Man, incidentally, that fishing village I did not discover in the first one until like 50 hours after I finished the campaign.
Oh, really?
It was so exciting.
That's a fun place. There's a lot to explore there. I had a good time with that one.
Yeah, I was like, well, I can't believe I just missed this entire village. I'm just going to hang out here for a while.
Yeah, I dig that. There does seem to be a bigger focus on story beats in the second game. I won't spoil any of that here, obviously, but the first game, it had a situation. It didn't necessarily have a story. And some of it was even sort of told out of order, which made it even more jarring and a little more difficult to kind of figure out where you were at in Breath of the Wild. And there does seem to be, at least from I'm making air quotes here, plot standpoint, a little more kind of focus to Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, you start the game kind of in story. Like you get like big exposition dump and a big mystery that has to be solved. And then there are a lot of points, even in just the few hours that I've spent with the game so far, that kind of call back to that. There's a significant character that I ran into who was sort of like, so get me caught up, Link. And you get sort of like here's the important story things that have happened in the game thus far. So yeah, I think there definitely seems to be a more overt effort to kind of be focused and not just have like, a situation, a loose outline of things that are happening. There's definitely a much more kind of compelling mystery to solve and a lot of little fun kind of little Easter eggs that it sort of drops that kind of pique your interest and point you in a more kind of structured direction, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm loving that aspect of it.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, I've never been huge on Zelda lore. I don't have the Hyrule Historia or whatever encyclopedia because it's just not interesting to me. Like, I don't really care what like Zelda's lineage is or whatever is in there. I mean, I almost wanted to skip that entire opening section because it was just so plotting.
Really? Oh, I like that. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, well, I don't know what people's expectations from a Zelda game are. To me, they've always just been like sort of these fun adventures and, you solve some puzzles, you fight some bosses. But in the back of my head, I'm just like, man, some people are really into this to connect all the dots between the Zelda games and figure out which Link is an ancestor of which other Link and and that sort of stuff, which is fine, but it seems like they have really sort of like brought that more to the surface in this one.
Yeah, I can see that.
And man, it starts out, I don't remember if Breath of the Wild started out this way. It's so like big drama Zelda now. Like it starts up and it's just Tears of the Kingdom in this stark white text on a black screen. And then like the whole little intro sequence where you're exploring the cave is so different from like previous Zelda openings, or at least that was my impression.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And that's my impression as well. But to me, that seems sort of welcome and sort of like, oh, finally. Maybe not finally.
Yeah. Zelda's serious business. So I mean, it's so different than what I like my sort of concept of a Zelda game, which is like, oh, is this where Zelda was heading all these years? It's finally, it's going to be on HBO next year. There's going to be the super serious Zelda adaptation. Not sure.
I mean, it's very pretty. I would watch that show. I think that opening scene of her and Link is kind of beautifully animated. I think it's really quite striking to look at. And
yeah, it was cool. They did a really good job with it.
So I like it. I also, appreciate the effort to give Zelda a little more character and a little more consequence and not just be yet another damsel in distress. So yeah, there's some lifting being done there from a character standpoint that I appreciate.
Just from the intro section?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, in my memory of her role in Breath of the Wild as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's definitely been more active of a character in these last two games than in probably all previous Zeldas combined.
True.
But yeah, to me, on some level, it felt like, Breath of the Wild was great, but this one feels sort of like, the second chapter in not necessarily like a trilogy, but just like the follow-up to this wildly successful thing, like The Matrix Reloaded or something, where it's like, okay, we had that great thing, but how do we justify a sequel? It's time to completely like flesh out the world and all, like, add all this lore and backstory and everything, and that has always had kind of mixed results for me.
Okay, I can see that. Sure, absolutely.
Like, I would totally be fine with just them dropping Link down into the middle of the lake and telling him to, figure out what's going on. I don't necessarily need a mystery box to be solved, but so far it's been interesting. It's just, it's not really what I'm here for. They're certainly doing a better job of it than Monster Hunter did, so I'll give them that.
I don't get that reference, but
so like that was one of the most hotly requested things about the Monster Hunter series for a long time. Is people would play it and they'd be like, "Well, there's no story." And then in Monster Hunter World, they really made an effort to add like cutscenes and all this voice acting in service of really like pretty terrible storyline. Not like bad, but just so uninteresting and inconsequential. Yeah. So, I mean, this one, I'm just like, I wonder where all of this is leading. And it's not like in Monster Hunter where I actually would just like try and skip all the cutscenes. So, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for, at least the next 50 hours or so.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I like the mysteries. I thought there were like enough questions asked in Breath of the Wild that didn't kind of have clear answers that I was sort of like, oh, it is, it's a world of mystery. Anything can happen, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, there does seem to be some sort of very overt, like trying to tie some of those things up happening in this. And I don't know if that was sort of the roadmap from the beginning is we're going to make 3 games. We're going to tie all these mysteries together and here's how it's going to go. Or if there's some like, well, shit, we have to explain this thing that we dropped in the first one. So I guess, is it Breaking Bad or is it Lost? Where, with Breaking Bad, they had a roadmap. They knew exactly what those 5 years were going to look like and what those episodes would contain. And in Lost, it was sort of like, oh no, there's a polar bear now. How do we explain that? And it was just a mess and it was never satisfying. So to a degree, I hope that there is a roadmap. I hope that there is some plan for how these things are all going to kind of like come together in some way that feels satisfying.
I imagine it's going to end up more like that than sort of the Lost format. I just don't see Nintendo doing something like that. I don't even think, like, who knows if there will even be a Breath of the Wild 3. Maybe the next one will be a totally different thing.
Yeah.
Not be surprised at all. I'll tell you what I do like about it, though, even with the lore stuff, is how it manages to pull references from previous Zelda games and just incorporate them into sort of this new Breath of the Wild sort of universe in interesting ways. And a lot of it is, like monsters that haven't shown up for a while, or at least I don't remember them being in a Zelda game in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always fun to see just a familiar thing again.
Yeah. Yeah, they're doing it with locations. There's a few places in the very early hours of the game that you go that are named after things from previous Zelda games. And I'm like, oh, that's that thing. So, yeah, some of that obviously is just nostalgia buttons they're pushing, but it is cool that there is some level of kind of continuity and maybe, this new Zelda, now kind of 2-episode, maybe potentially a trilogy or whatever, is some way of kind of retconning all of those Zelda lore things into some story that is threaded together in a satisfying way.
See, I don't need the whole like Zelda series to have this intertwined story. Or I don't know.
No, I don't think I need it either. But I don't know. It's just like the first time a character said to me, "Go to this thing that has a very familiar name to you if you've played a Zelda game before." I went, cool. It's going to be just like that. And it's not. It's really that in name alone. But, there's like an effort made there to kind of marry it to things that have come before. And I'm a sucker for nostalgia like anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, there are shared elements between the games, but it's always sort of up in the air about what it's like, how similar it is going to be. to previous games.
Well, I mean, right down to the Zelda, Link, Ganon hook of essentially the three of them, traveling through time with each other and trying to sort of like defeat him, Ganon, at some point or another.
Yeah.
And where all of those things sort of land in some haphazard Zelda timeline.
See, I forget what caused me to think this. There was something happened in my most recent session where I was like, oh, this is just what Final Fantasy does. Where it's like not a continuous storyline between any of the games, but concepts from each one, or like not entire characters, but sort of archetypes from previous Final Fantasies will show up in a future one. And they're similar enough where you're just like, oh, okay, I kind of know what this guy's deal is going to be, but who knows how he fits into the story this time. There's like just enough of that familiarity there, but it's still like a fresh take on whatever that character or location is. This is the first time I've really felt that way about Zelda. Maybe it's probably been happening for much longer than I realized, because they do tend to use a lot of locations and characters over and over again. But it feels like, I mean, I don't know how much of this is intentional or how much of this is like the fans connecting the dots, but it seems like there's more connection happening in like across all of the Zelda games than in the Final Fantasy games.
Yeah, I mean, I've not played the Final Fantasy games, so I can't refute or defend that position, but there does seem to be an attempt to not necessarily recycle, but at least reference some of those things from previous Zelda games. And I think some of it too is sort of the baggage of being a direct sequel. Is that there's not, and I've said this on previous episodes, there's not a lot of examples of this in Zelda history. That you can go to Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask, and those are direct sequels to each other. You can do, I can't think of many others. Spirit Tracks and the Phantom Hourglass are direct sequels to the Wind Waker, but kind of incidental sequels. Yeah, but there's not a ton more. So I think there is, it's like this pressure to kind of tell a story that is befitting of 600 hours, right? If each game is 200 hours long, and if this is, pitched as a trilogy, that's a lot of heavy lifting. So I think you're going to end up kind of hopefully recycling some of those places and people and monsters from previous games in some way that feels satisfying for the people who are willing to sit through all of it.
Yeah. Man, there is a big Zelda game that is a direct sequel to another big Zelda game, but is a huge spoiler. But I think it's hilarious that it gets overlooked. Oh.
We might have to have that conversation offline. I'm curious.
You probably just don't remember. Because I'm pretty sure you played both of them.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, I mean, the direct sequel thing pops up every once in a while, but I feel like it's just sort of incidental. Where they're like, oh yeah, this one happened after the previous game. There's not a lot connecting them directly. So this, like, Tears of the Kingdom feels much more directly connected to Breath of the Wild than any of the previous sort of direct sequels have been.
Oh yeah, yes. Yeah, I think this is the first time ever I think I needed like a previously on The Legend of Zelda.
Did you watch that little video they put out?
I did watch the official like story summary. Yeah, that was helpful, I thought. Because there were definitely beats in that I was sort of like, I don't remember that happening at all. So, yes, that was helpful. I would encourage anybody, perhaps if you've not started or if you're still in the first few hours of Tears of the Kingdom, go watch Nintendo's official story catch-up video. It's like 4 hours. 4 minutes, excuse me.
A mere 4 hours to catch up.
It's a mere 4 hours.
Yeah.
4 minutes long, but it does hit a lot of important points that I thought were pretty salient to my experience, at least in the early hours of this game.
Yeah. I'm sure somebody's got you covered with their own 4-hour lore catch-up video, if that's what you really want.
And how it connects to every other Zelda game ever.
Yes, yeah. Do you have that Zelda, Hyrule Historia thing?
I do have that, yeah. I don't know if I'm not a flat Hyrule conspiracy theorist, but it's like, I don't need all of those pieces to go together. But I think it's intriguing that there is kind of a time travel story here of these three figures essentially sort of like being purposed over and over and over again to kind of fight with and against each other. I think that's neat. As much as sort of Zelda and Link are kind of the key to that, Xanon is that third point in the Triforce essentially, I like that Nintendo continues to find unique ways to kind of recycle the three of them and tell that story over again.
Mm-hmm. Is that
so?
thing?
Yeah.
So I'm very curious about this book suddenly. So it covers like the entire series. It's not just based on one or two games, right?
It's been a little while since I've thumbed through it, but if I remember correctly, that is the case up to Breath of the Wild anyways.
Okay. Now I'm just wondering if I should check it out. I remember having the Nintendo Player's Guide or whatever for Link to the Past. And it was mostly like a game guide. It would have maps of the dungeons and everything. But occasionally there would be a little aside where it's like, here's typical Hyrulean garb or whatever. Like, here are some weapons that Hyrule soldiers used. And it didn't really get in deep into the history of everything or try and bring other games into it because there were only 3 Zelda games at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a little backstory, a little flavor to whatever else is happening in the game because they didn't necessarily have space for that on the cartridge itself.
Sure.
And I was like, okay, that's about as much sort of additional information that as I need it's sort of fleshed out the world a little bit without turning it into just the whole Zelda family tree and all of that stuff. But now I'm just weirdly curious about this Hyrule Historia though.
Yeah, the thing that I remember, and I'm looking around my office here trying to figure out if I have it handy. I don't, unfortunately. I think it's downstairs. But I remember that there's a bestiary in there and stuff like that, and kind of important characters throughout the history of the series. And it kind of tells you the first game they appeared in and the most recent game. And
see, that's probably something I want.
Yeah, all that stuff is I like a bestiary. I think that's kind of fun, particularly in games that have been kind of this long running to sort of see that stuff kind of get recycled and reimagined for new games is really, really neat. Really neat. I think that is the value of that. There's a cool website too, zeldadungeon.net. That has been around forever. It's a fan site, but they go deep in a lot of this stuff, and they have world maps from previous games and character wikis and stuff like that. And anytime there's a reference, I remember this happening a few times in Breath of the Wild, where it's sort of why does that sound familiar? Why should I know who this person is or what that place is? If you look it up on zeldadungeon.net, usually there's some sort of it's from this other game, and he was critical to the story in this way. And that stuff is kind of fun, kind of satisfying, but totally not really necessary.
Inevitably, somebody on the internet is just cataloging everything. We'll just plug it into their database. So oh yeah, he was in this one. This is what he was doing in this other one.
I need a Google spreadsheet of every character ever that appeared in the Zelda game.
Oh yeah. I mean, I like that kind of thing where you look it up and it's here's what moblins look like in every installment of Zelda ever. That's cool to me. I don't need to know the backstory of explaining their, ecology. It's this is why they have long noses in this one, and this is why they're shorter. And I'm that's not as important.
And why are they so angry? Why are they always trying to kill me?
Yeah, that I would like to know. What's their deal?
What did I do to offend you?
They're just grumpy pig guys.
Yeah. I think that this is a little heavier than maybe in my brain than it is in reality, but the whole blood moon thing from Breath of the Wild, and for those who have not played modern Zelda games, the hook in Breath of the Wild was there was a blood moon. And I forget how many cycles of the day-night cycle in the game, the blood moon would rise, and it would basically repopulate the world with enemies. Anybody you had killed, any camp you had wiped out, to unlock and open the treasure chest hidden within, et cetera, the blood moon would reset all of that, and you would go back there later, and that place would have a bunch more enemies there for you to kill, or avoid if you want to at that point. That conceit is back in Tears of the Kingdom. And usually accompanied by a sort of little cinematic that sort of
there's
explains
a whole
over and over
cutscene for it. Yeah.
over and over again of why that's happening. And I'm like, are these the same people that were killed? Are they like zombies now? Or do they have memory of their previous life? Or is it like a rebirth? Like if a moblin has sentience, presumably they had friends and family and shared experiences. Does that stuff reset during a blood moon and they come back fresh as babes? Or do they remember that and now they're more angry? Like, you killed me. Do they carry a grudge? Is there a nemesis system somewhere baked into Zelda where, the Cyclops that I killed in Breath of the Wild is still hunting me 2 games later? I probably not. I don't think there's that much intentionality to it. But I think there's in the same way that folks want to know, is Toad's head shaped like that, or is he wearing a hat? I kind of want to know.
It's his hat.
Do moblins and Cyclops and all those other monsters have what are the lizard ones that live in the water? Lizalfos?
The Zora.
Yeah.
Oh no, not the other lizards.
Yes, the other water dwelling lizards.
The lizards, not the fish. Sorry, that's racist.
Yeah. Do they have sentience? Do they remember their previous lives when they're reborn during the blood moon?
I never thought about that. Does that happen to Link? Does that how Link comes back every time you die? You just wait till the next blood moon?
I don't know.
I just started wondering about this like after the second or third time I had to skip through that cutscene. I was just like, man, people just deal with this all the time? You're just living in your little village and there's like a blood moon and everybody there's like red smoke pouring out of everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah. Hyrule sounds like a real miserable place.
It does sound like a tough life, yeah. Yeah, there's a spot I went to in Tears of the Kingdom where like something catastrophic kind of happened in the first game, and now they're happy that like they're rebuilding, and hey, we have tourists now who want to come see it. And I'm like, we're doing disaster tourism in a Zelda game? That's real dark too. How come nobody's exploring those themes? I'm like, well, because I'm the only person who thinks like that.
Well, they seem to be pretty excited about it, so
yeah,
good for them.
Hey, if it brings people to town and they trade apples for arrows, then hey, the economy, as long as the economy is in good shape, we're good.
Meanwhile, I need more rupees so I can buy clothes.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. Rupees are very hard to come by in Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know why it's so difficult. Perhaps a sort of a reflection of our modern economy here in America.
I remember they like stayed fairly difficult to come by in Breath of the Wild, whereas in previous Zelda games, you would be real hard up for money for like the first few hours, and then you just have maximum rupees for the rest of the game, and there'd be nothing to buy with them. But in Breath of the Wild, that was not my experience, and I'm kind of worried about. I'm kind of just like remembering that was the case as I stare at those nice-looking armor sets on display, and I'm just like, oh, I used to have that. Why don't I just have it still?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one that I love was this, like the sneak suit, the ninja one that had the hood.
Yeah, I want that sneak suit.
I'm like, that's the one. Link always looked like a badass in that. And yeah, I swear, it's in my closet at Breath of the Wild. Can I just go back to that place?
Yeah. Did you go to a stable yet? You said you went to a stable. Yeah.
Yeah, I found one so far.
Yeah. I think it remembered all the horses I had stabled in Breath of the Wild. Did you notice that?
What? No, that would be amazing. I'm playing on a different device, and I have not downloaded my save from Breath of the Wild to this device.
Okay.
Maybe I should do that.
I'm not 100% sure. It might be too late. I'm not sure how it works.
No!
But I went to the stable, and the stable master made some comment of like, oh, you've registered a horse here before. I'm like, no, I haven't. I definitely have not.
I've not had that experience. No, it was, a new customer.
Okay, yeah. Then I sort of just like brushed it aside. It was like, whatever, I don't know what that was about. And the next time I went there, I like went out and tamed a new horse. I made sure I got like the same horse I would drive around. Not drive, but that I would ride around in Breath of the Wild, and I named him the same thing. I brought it to the stable. And the next time I went to check it out, there were 2 copies of the horse there, plus like 2 or 3 other horses that were named things that were like feasibly names that I would name a horse in the Zelda game. So I was like, okay, I wasn't even expecting it to like do the whole save file reading thing. So I thought that was kind of a cool surprise. And also, why did I go out of the way to tame a bunch of new horses?
I named all of my horses in Breath of the Wild after dogs who are no longer living.
Okay. Questionable move.
So now I get a sad reminder of all of my dogs, that are no longer with us. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I'm better off.
It's time for a new stable of horses.
Future dogs that are yet to be born.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I thought that was very interesting because I considered I wonder is it going to look at my old save file when I start this up? And I had not heard anything about it doing that. Probably because I probably would have ignored any article that talked about that anyway.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, that was a cool thing. That's the only sort of connection back to my previous save that I've noticed so far.
I wonder if there will be other places where it connects in that way. That's interesting. I was recently made aware by someone in our Discord that Splatoon 3 does that with your save for Splatoon 2. And I was like, oh, I need to get my Splatoon 2 save downloaded from the cloud onto my device. And it then, even though I had played some of Splatoon 3 already, it unlocked those perks. So
cool.
Perhaps it's not too late for me to, get whatever sort of rightful thing is mine from my Breath of the Wild save.
Yeah. It would be nice to do that just in case there's other stuff besides the horses that it brings over.
Yeah. That would be interesting. At least give me, here's some cool armor you get from having played Breath of the Wild. That'd be nice. I'd take some armor.
Yeah.
Any armor, please.
Yeah,
instead of
just at this point, it's anything. So I don't look like I'm homeless.
No. This Sarah was like, why does he look like a caveman? I'm like, because he's basically a caveman. It's just, he's got half a tunic and some furry tights. That's about it.
I was just like, when are they going to get some clothes? Real bold decision to just have Link be nude throughout the entire game.
Running around in his techie boxer briefs for the whole time.
Yeah. Man, speaking of being homeless, did you buy the house in the first game?
I did.
Okay, I never found the house. Was it just in one of the villages? Like the villagers would just sell you a house? I got the impression that it was out in the forest somewhere.
No, it was in one of the villages, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I just completely blanked on that. I was wondering if, maybe they'll just have your house waiting for you if you go back to that village, but not for me.
No, there were some upgrades to that in Breath of the Wild where you could hang cool weapons on the wall and stuff like that and do some light decoration and stuff. So I did that somewhere. There is a save with a village that has a house that inevitably has a lightning sword hanging on the wall or something. And I would like to go back there and look at it and maybe take that sword with me into Tears of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. But I suspect that's not an option.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if I could, have a second chance at a house in Tears of the Kingdom. I guess I'll find out. I still have to make it over to that village.
Home ownership so unattainable, even in Hyrule.
Oh man.
I guess in summary, after talking about it for an hour and 15 minutes, terrible game. Nobody should play it.
Yeah, I mean it's not a bad game.
No, not at all.
I feel like I haven't played any of it yet. I feel like I'm just sort of still making my way through the extended tutorial. I haven't made it to one of the dungeon equivalent things, and I was really hoping to do that by this recording, but there's just so much to get distracted by, which is both a good and a bad thing.
Yeah, I think those come pretty far into that experience too. I'm hearing from coworkers and some of the folks in our Discord that before you get to kind of that dungeon equivalent, there is quite a bit of preamble. So again, like Breath of the Wild, you could probably run up to it from the first minute and do it if you wanted to, but
you're somebody did
following the natural flow of things in whichever direction you've elected to go. It does take some time to get there.
Yeah. It was kind of a rush because I wanted to just take in as much as possible during the 72 hours between release and us recording this. But that's totally not how I approach Breath of the Wild. So now I have a whole week to just sort of wander around and check down all these mushrooms or whatever I'm supposed to find. Hopefully by then I will spend a little more time in the depths and maybe have a dungeon taken care of. But maybe I'll just spend the whole time building stupid robots. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, and hopefully I can find a paraglider and.
Great. Just like 200 hours later, man, I just never found that paraglider. Where are they hiding it?
It's like my experience with Dragon Quest IX, where I just put 150 hours into a game and didn't do this one thing that everybody else did. And yeah, I'm just going to consume Zelda the same way. I'm just, nope, I'm going my own way. I don't need to glide anywhere. I'm just gonna walk all the places. Yep.
I'm pretty sure it's mandatory. Like, as mandatory as anything was in Breath of the Wild. Who knows? Yeah. Maybe you can just skip it, but you should. You'll find it, I'm sure, by next week.
I don't think you could miss it in Breath of the Wild. You kind of had to have it.
They just gave it to you. That was how you got off the first area, right?
Off the plateau, yeah. There was not another way down, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I don't know why it was not part of my standard kit. Why I didn't wake up in Tears of the Kingdom with it in my hand.
I know. I was like, they put so much emphasis on giving you the new powers. And I was like, okay, well, this is cool. Aren't we forgetting something? Like, where is that little glider I would have? And that comes from somewhere else.
Yeah, no, it is not part of your standard outfit.
Also, can you remind me of this? Like, bombs were also one of the abilities in the first one, right? That you just had an unlimited supply of bombs.
You did, yes. They were. You could sort of like summon up a bomb at any time in Breath of the Wild, and that is not an option for you in Tears of the Kingdom anymore.
It is not, and yeah, I was just trying to remember because, man, I'm having some fun times with bombs in this, but it's not quite the unlimited supply that you had previously.
No, but check the walls and ceilings in those wells. You might find some bombs there.
Yeah. I'm snapping those up as much as I can find them. I should spend a little more time in the wells, it sounds like.
All right. Well, we will inevitably check in on this game. Again, there are still a lot of probably Zelda stories to tell here as we dig a little deeper into Tears of the Kingdom. But for our listeners, if you're playing along or just sort of like this kind of banter, you can certainly jump into the Zelda channel on our Discord. If you go to VGHangover.com, there is a link to that. Sign up, hang out with us, chat about not just Zelda, but other video games as well. But if you need a friend in your life who is as insane about Zelda as we are right now, there is a place where you can hang out and do that. Yeah.
Keeping it spoiler free. I've been poking my head in there every once in a while.
Yeah.
But, I'm kind of torn because I want to go through this sort of as blindly as possible. But I would be down to, discuss all the weird contraptions people are building. I like all the little clips of people torturing the Koroks with, like, strapping them to rockets or whatever.
I keep seeing crucified Koroks, and I'm like...
The internet really quickly just, like, landed on, like, oh, yes, all Koroks should be on the cross. So I'm glad they can agree on something.
The stages of the Korok Eucharist are... Yeah, it's a little bleak. They are very annoying, though. Yeah.
Yeah, turn it on real fast on those guys. Where it's like, oh, yes, it's these things. It's like, can you take me over here? And they point to a mountain peak that's like 50 miles away. Like,
yes, yeah.
You got to work this out. You're like, whatever the situation is. This is not my problem.
Yeah, this is you took this thing that was kind of mundane and slightly humorous from the previous game and made it much more kind of, tedious in the second game.
Yeah.
Yep. Ugh. You need them though. You got to get them.
You got to do it. You got to get all 900.
Ugh. God. Well, I better get cracking on that. So I've got like 10 so far.
Right.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. If you need any more video game hangover in your brain, you should follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/VGHangover. You can always get show notes and links and tell us what you thought about this episode at VGHangover.com. That is also where you'll find the link to join us on our Discord, which I mentioned previously. So just don't sleep on that whole VGHangover.com thing. TJ works very hard on that.
Oh, yeah. Around the clock, I'm just making little adjustments to it. Oh, no.
He puts on his little hat that says webmaster and he gets to work.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I got my little miner's helmet with the light on it. I don't know if that's what you were envisioning, but that's what came to mind.
No, I just like a dad hat that had you like at the mall. You got somebody to stitch the words webmaster on it.
Yeah,
in Times New Roman. Too. Yeah. Excellent. So please subscribe, rate, and review us on your podcasting app of choice, and maybe help us out by telling your friends about the show.
Yeah. Helps us get the word out, bring in new listeners, get more people sharing their Korok torture videos. That's great. We want to give thanks again to Fearofdark for our new intro and outro music this week. If you'd like to hear more of his work, you can go to fearofdark.bandcamp.com, add all those albums to your cart. That would be great.
Nice. We'll be back next week. I promise we will talk about probably some other game next week.
Oh, really? Yeah.
There has to be a percentage of the population that is just not down with all the Zelda talk. I don't quite understand it myself, but there's a lot of games out there.
A week later, everybody's just over it. They're like, yeah, we just beat Ganon like that weekend. Why are you guys still talking about it?
People tuning in going, when's the Diablo 4 show, guys?
Are you going to play Diablo 4?
I'm not. No, definitely not.
Okay, I'm probably not going to play it.
But that was also happening this week, so.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next week, I promise. Until then, this is Randy Dickinson.
This is DJ Ross.
Thanks for listening to Video Game Hangover. Goodbye.
Good night.
See ya. Yeah.